Shila Gurudev ki jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtutara Shatashmar Bhaktivedanta Vaman Gosvāmī Mahārāja ki jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtutara Shatashmar Bhaktivedanta Swami Mahārāja Shila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtutara Shatashmar Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Gosvāmī Mahārāja ki jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtutara Shatashmar Jagar Guru Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Paramahansa Kula Swami Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Tatiya Shubha Vyas Puja Maha Mahotsav ki jai. Shri Nitila Pravishta Mahabhagavat Srila Gorksharas Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Nitila Pravishta Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai. Nitila Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Patadasha Gunath Shara Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki jai. Namachay Shri Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Vraja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Sarva Abhishta Bharati Giriraj Maharaj ki jai. Shri Radhakun Shamakun ki jai. Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi ki jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Shri Bhakti Devi ki jai. Shri Purnamasi Yogamaya ki jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev ki jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtutara Shatashmad Srila Gaur Govinda Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Tadiya Shubha Tirubhav Titi ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shinitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Dandavat Pranams, everybody. So I'm going to read right now something that Vaijayantī-mālā Mataji wrote last year around this time. I've heard her tell the story in brief, but she actually found her notes recently of what she wrote around that time. And so then she just wrote it out more nicely, and yeah, I wanted to share that with everybody, because this morning I didn't get a chance to read about Srila Gaur Govinda Goswami Maharaj, and so Dandavat Pranams Gargarajji. So let me share my screen, and we'll begin. Where is it? Oh, and if anybody wants to find the text, it's on, I just shared it on my Facebook page. So you can find it there. All right. Final Darshan with Śrīmad Gaur Govinda Goswami Maharaj. A personal account told by Vaijayantī-mālā dāsī. This is 9th February 1996, Śrīdhāma, Māyāpura. One second, let me make this a little bigger. Okay. I offer unlimited heartfelt pranams at the lotus feet of my beloved Gurudev, Om Vishnupad Śrīmad Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. By his causeless mercy, I am increasingly appreciating the astonishing glories of Om Vishnupad Śrīmad Gaur Govinda Maharaj, to whom I also offer my innumerable heartfelt pranams. I offer pranam eternally to my ever well-wishers, Om Vishnupad Śrīmad Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to Om Vishnupad Śrīmad Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj, and to all pure Vaishnavas in the line of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. I also offer my humble pranam to the respected Sannyasigan and to all Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. I have been feeling for a while that I should share my final darshan with Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj, and today, just days before his 25th Tirubhav Titi, I am inspired to actually do this. It is a personal account, more like a diary entry. I wrote of this experience on 14th February 1996, just days after he left this world, but I never shared it because I never completed it to my satisfaction. This account is based on that. Before I begin, I want to beg forgiveness if I incorrectly depict any of the events in that final darshan. There were others in the room. I'm simply sharing my own memory. In rereading my memoir on 14th February, I see there have been some slight inaccuracies in my recent narrations of Srila Govinda Maharaja's pastime of disappearance. I met my beloved Gurudev in 1991, and in 1996, I received permission from him to attend the annual GBC meetings for Gurukul-related matters. I journeyed there with Chandrika Dāsī, a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, a Shiksha disciple of my Gurudev, and my dear friend. When we arrived in Māyāpura, we stayed in the Long building. February 9th of 1996 was the appearance day of Śrīmad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, and that morning, Chandrika and I went to his samadhi. His mercy was palpable, and it was a powerful experience to sit before him and pray. Circumambulating Govardhan was also deeply moving and stayed with me for quite some time, although I do not remember making any specific prayer. We then took Achman of Radhakund and Shamakund and went to the yoga pit. It was a potent parikrama. The meetings were on the 4th floor of the Conch building, and Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaja's room was also on the 4th floor. They arranged this especially as he could not easily walk up and down stairs. Chandrika had never met Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj and really wanted to. It was our great fortune that he was in the same meetings we were. On that February 9th, the meeting began at 10 a.m. Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj's disciple helped him into the room. As he entered, he kindly smiled at us. I could not help but notice during the meeting that while some of the devotees present did not seem to be aware of Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaja's spiritual stature, whenever they turned to him to ask him for his opinion, they respectfully folded their palms before addressing him. They did not do that with anyone else. He had been a controversial person, famous for fearlessly stating with irrefutable evidence from Srila Prabhupada's books and other shastras that it is not possible for the jiva to fall from Vaikuntha. He emphasized again and again the importance of pure sadhu sangha and of accepting a pure guru, one that is fully conversant with shastra, realized in the absolute truth, and totally devoid of material attachment. Śrīmad Bhagavatam 11.3.21. Like any bona fide representative of the truth, he never hesitated to speak the truth, caring not if it resulted in his being bereft of followers, position, or wealth. In this way, by his single-pointed attachment to Krishna and his unattachment from anything material, he was a true shelter for all. So, on the afternoon of February 9th, Chandrika woke me from a rest. Vaijayantī, we're going back to Vrindavan tomorrow. Could you buy bread rolls for the trip? I went to the restaurant, which was just inside the main entrance, and purchased the prasad. But just as I was leaving, Chandrika and Bhakta Rupa Prabhu arrived to tell me that again plans had changed, and we would now be leaving the day after tomorrow. Chandrika excitedly told me that Bhakta Rupa Prabhu was going to try to arrange for us to meet with Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj that evening. Chandrika, do you have a question for Maharaj? I asked her. We can't visit such a sadhu without asking him a question. She said that she would write some down. I returned to our room with the bread rolls. I can't remember where Chandrika went, but she later popped in to tell me that Srila Maharaj had agreed to see us and to come now. I joined her on the ground floor of the Conch building. Chandrika has a largish handwriting, and she had written pages of questions. We read over them together and considered which one we thought he would like the most. We then numbered which one to ask first, second, third. I think we selected 4 questions. We walked up the 4 flights of stairs. It was dusk. About 10 to 15 devotees stood along the railing of the balcony outside the room. My first thought was, oh, it's going to be a group darshan. But those devotees did not come inside. It was just Chandrika, Bhakta Rupa Prabhu, and me. A servant and 4 other disciples sat behind one of the 2 beds in the room. They did not speak the entire time. Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj was sitting cross-legged on the other bed. The mood in the room was peaceful and soft, a stark contrast to the mood of efficiency that pervaded the building at that time. Devotees from around the world convened to discuss society's matters, and computer screens were seen glowing in every room. In this room, however, a different energy permeated. It glowed saffron. It was very soft and gentle, and computers were conspicuous by their absence. We offered our obeisances to Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj and sat before him. Bhakti-Prabhu. Maharaj, this is Chandrika Dāsī, our god sister. She has always wanted to meet you. And this is Vaijayantī-mālā dāsī from Australia, Narad Muni Prabhu's wife. They are teachers in the Vrindavan Gurukul. I had met Srila Maharaj on his first visit to Australia in 1990. I was not qualified to be aware of his glories then, but that did not stop him from bestowing his great mercy upon my husband and me. My husband directly and me indirectly, but that is another story. Chandrika said that she was happy to be able to and had been waiting to do so for many years. I asked, Maharaj, I have been in Vrindavan for 5 years, but in that time you have not come there. Will you come? Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj explains that he had an operation on his foot, and because of that, he had to use a commode. He said that the bathrooms in the Vrindavan guest house were not suitable. He then picked up his foot and showed us the scar from the operation on its sole. I can only think that by this, he bestowed more mercy upon us than we will ever be able to understand. Aren't your disciples building you a house? I asked. Manju Bhashini and her husband? Nodding gently, he said, Krishnananda. Chandrika then asked him her first question. How can we relate the intensity of separation Krishna felt in Dwarka to the intensity of separation Mahaprabhu felt in the Gambhīra? Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj proceeded to tell us about Krishna's feelings of separation from Braj while he was in Dwarka, and he became lost in that pastime. How, while lying on his bed, Krishna would cry, Radhe, 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 Gopi, 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 Gopi. Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj loudly called out these names, which really amazed me. My Gurudev, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Gosvāmī Maharaj, was very focused on presenting the goal of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, which is to become a maidservant at the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani. Some thought this inappropriate, and there was a chorus of objection to those who were not aware that everything he said was based on Shastra. So much could be found in Srila Prabhupada's books. He never presented the pastimes of Sri Radhakrishna cheaply. He was simply pointing the way. Due to some misconceptions, however, the very word gopi had become quite controversial. Most would certainly not cry it out amidst the GPC meetings. But Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj was calling it out loudly, which conveyed his absorption. It was not an act of defiance, but a glimpse of what was dear to his heart. I had learned from Srila Gurudev that a Vaishnava is the same inside and out. He is simple. The concept of duplicity is totally foreign to him. So Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj's rendition of this pastime was like that. It was obvious that these talks were simply his life. For the most part, though, he spoke very softly, and at the same time was so animated. He talked of Rohini speaking Braj pastimes to the inhabitants of Dwarka, and how Subhadra guarded the door. He acted out Krishna's, Baladev's, and Subhadra's ecstatic manifestations a few times, their arms contracting, their eyes getting larger and wider. He was really deeply absorbed. Bhakta Rupa Prabhu sat before him, eyes wide and a big smile on his face. Time and again, Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj would look at him with much affection. Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj then asked his servants to bring him something, and a large bundle of granthas wrapped in a saffron cloth was placed before him on the bed. Again, I was touched by a wave of softness. Shastra was so dear to his heart that certain books went where he went. It struck me as so simple and pure. He proceeded to read a pastime that he had copied into a notebook. It was of Krishna leaving Dwarka, staggering out of his palace to ascend his chariot, swaying back and forth, his eyes rolling. Chandrika whispered to me, "You've seen it." 7 months before, I had attended my first Puri Rathayatra and had become charmed by the scene being described. Occasionally, Srila Mahārāja would become quiet and half close the book as if to conclude. But then Chandrika's eager, "What happened next?" and his own obvious love for the pastime inspired him to continue. This happened a few times. He would then reopen the book and speak more of the confidential reason for Rathayatra. Later, one of the 4 devotees sitting behind the other bed told me that he had heard Srila Maharaj tell that pastime several times, but never had he heard him tell it the way he did that night. Srila Maharaj intertwined Leela and Tattva as he softly and animatedly spoke, regularly looking at us and asking the question he, a perfect teacher, was well known for asking, "Do you understand?" It was enthralling, but my lower back was giving me much pain. It was almost distracting. I knew that if I could rest my elbow at the very end of the other bed, the one parallel to his, it would relieve the pressure. I thought, if this were my Gurudev, he would not mind, as he would know that I intend no disrespect. But I did not know Srila Govinda Maharaj so well, and I knew that he appreciated the observance of proper etiquette. I did not want to transgress that before him. But the mood in the room was so extremely soft and sweet, and everything felt so natural that I decided to take a chance, keeping my eyes keenly on him as my elbow slowly found a resting place at the very end of the other bed. I thought if I saw him flinch ever so slightly or frown, raise an eyebrow or look displeased, I would immediately remove my elbow. But he seemed to not notice at all, not even slightly. I am not so satisfied, by the way, with how I tell this pastime, which shows the Gaudiya conception, the most esoteric conception. I'm not satisfied by the way. Let me reread that. I'm not satisfied, by the way, with how I tell this pastime, which shows the Gaudiya conception, the most esoteric conception of Rathayatra. But I don't want to pretend that I remember more than I do. Nor do I want to copy and paste snippets from the versions published and distributed widely by his disciples, who heard him narrate it several times. The first time I heard this Leela was on that evening of February 9th, and I will share what I honestly remember and or wrote in my notes. Eventually, Srila Maharaj narrated how the 3 chariots arrived in Vrindavan. Again, he closed the book. Chandrika, who had been eagerly hanging on to every word, asked, "But Maharaj, did Krishna enter Vrindavan? What happened next?" Srila Maharaj smiled, happy with this question, and proceeded to describe Krishna's entering Nidhuvan and how Srimati Radharani was lying there in intense separation. The only way her gopi friends could tell that she was alive was by holding a cotton swab under her nose. Lalita went to her and whispered in her ear, "Krishna has come." And Vishaka went to bring Krishna, who had become stunned as he stood outside the kunj. And then, Srila Maharaj said, there was eye-to-eye union. I had noticed that Srila Maharaj was making a wheezing sound as he breathed. It was like when someone has asthma. His servant had turned the fan on, and I felt a bit cross with him, thinking the fan was the cause of Maharaj's discomfort. I had no idea that it was Maharaj's absorption in the pastime that was manifesting in this way. Chandrika did not notice this, but she did notice tears in Maharaj's eyes, which I did not. I then asked, "But Maharaj, why Puri? This is a Vrindavan Dwarka pastime. Why Puri?" He began to answer, but would have only spoken for about 30 to 40 seconds. My eternal regret is that I cannot remember what he said. He then folded his palms. looked at us softly and said, "I am very sorry, I cannot speak." A commanding silence pervaded the room, that beautiful room with flowers and an altar between the two beds, and I knew that this time we really had to leave. We thanked him, offered our respectful pranam, and left. Bhakta Rup Prabhu came out with us and we walked down the stairs. Chandrika commented that it seems that Srila Maharaj was experiencing deep feelings of separation. As we left the lobby of the conch building, 2 men hurriedly came down the stairs and flew past us. "Maharaj needs a doctor," one of them said as they ran off. I was bewildered and wondered what on earth could have made Maharaj so ill so quickly. I never imagined he was leaving this world. It was moving too fast and seemed surreal. But we were only just talking to him, I thought. They are his disciples, so the extreme concern is natural. I'm sure he'll be fine. I sat down on the stone seats on the quadrangle outside the temple and talked with Australian Tara, who was in Māyāpura at the time. After about 10 minutes, 2 girls I did not know came over to us and informed us that Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj had just left this world. I ran over to Chandrika, who was talking with some other people, and told her. Without waiting a second, we flew up the stairs. The closer we came to the 4th floor, the louder we heard the unified voices chanting the Maha Mantra in Srila Prabhupada's Tompkins Square Park tune. Many devotees had gathered outside the room. Entrance was only given to sannyasis, jis, and other senior devotees, along with some male disciples who were also there at Srila Maharaja's side. We were in total disbelief. As I said, it seemed surreal. I don't use that word lightly, but no other word describes how I felt. I saw Bhakta Rup Prabhu inside the room, sitting cross-legged on the floor at the other bed, his face down and palms folded in prayer. Chandrika and I asked Aniruddha Prabhu from Melbourne to call Bhakta Rup Prabhu outside. "I don't know what is happening," he said. "Just pray." He returned to his position on the floor. The servant saw us outside the room and expressed some intense anger at Chandrika. I suggested that she immediately return to our room, which she did. Concerned she was safe, I soon returned also, to find her weeping. We were in shock and tried to recall everything about the darshan. Chandrika wrote many notes, which we now cannot trace. After a few hours of hearing the continuous chanting coming from the top of the conch building, we decided to go there again, thinking that if we didn't, we would never really believe what had happened. This time, we were able to go inside. Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj had been placed in a sitting position. He was bedecked with many, many garlands. Male disciples were massaging his legs, and female disciples were putting their head at his feet. He looked incredibly beautiful, and an indescribable auspiciousness pervaded the room, which had a tangible effect on my heart. After 20 minutes, someone asked the male disciples to remain in the room and the ladies to leave. We went downstairs and waited in the lobby. I will never forget the sight of Srila Maharaj on a Vyasasan appearing at the top of the last stretch of stairs. His skin glowed and looked like porcelain. His beauty was breathtaking. Even though it was now late evening, hundreds of devotees were present, waiting to offer him obeisances. He was taken to Srila Prabhupada's samadhi and placed before his beloved Gurudev. A devotee sang Ohe Vaishnav Thakur and Jai Gaur Govinda Swami Patita Pavana. After doing parikrama of Srila Prabhupada 3 times, the procession went to Srila Prabhupada's Bhajan Kutir for darshan of Shishi Gaur Nitai, then to the main mandir and Srila Prabhupada and Sri Nrsingadev, and finally, Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj was placed on the platform before Sri Radha Madhav. The conch blew, the bell rang, and at 11 p.m. or so, hundreds of devotees were singing Govindam prayers. Someone led Sri Guru Vashtakam as senior Vaishnavas offered Srila Maharaj flowers, gently sprayed him with scented water, and placed Sri Madhav's massive garland upon him. Shripad Jataka Maharaj offered him arati, and the devotees sang his pranam mantra. But then, just as we were so absorbed, Māyāpura Chandraprabhu drew our attention by bursting into the temple room and running onto the stage, trying to get the attention of the senior devotees. Jayapataka Maharaj turned and walked with him off to the Jayapataka Maharaj turned and walked with him off the stage. We heard sirens. "Close the doors!" someone cried. "It is a raid!" Śrīpad Lokanath Maharaj told the women. Lokanath Maharaj told the women to stay behind Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj, who was taken off the stage and around the deities in parikrama. Chandrika and I linked arms and did as we were told. Somehow or other, in that crowd of people, we got to walk directly behind Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj's Vyasasan. This is a clear picture in my mind. Srila Maharaj was carried out of the temple room, but for some inexplicable reason, Chandrika and I did not go to the car, but stayed inside. Sriman Purijan Prabhu was also in the temple. We could hear gunshots. The temple doors were locked, and the three of us and one or two pujaris were the only ones inside. We had no idea that the land raid was not serious and actually thought this may be our own final minutes. Later, we found out that the gunshots were heard by devotees scaring off the attackers, who just had sticks. When we finally unlatched the temple doors and came outside, we saw many devotees. Everything seemed normal, a complete contrast to what we had thought was going on from inside the temple room. When we returned to Vrindavan, I went for darshan of my Gurudev in Mathura. I walked into the room to see someone talking with him about Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj. Vaijayantī was there, she told him. He turned to me with such sobriety and said, "What happened?" As I narrated the events, he listened very intently. I am shy to say that he gave me his undivided attention because it should be the other way around, but I trust the respected devotees will know what I mean. When I had finished describing the events of that day, he said, "He was a highly qualified and pure Vaishnav. He had affection for me also." I commented that I think some of Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj's disciples would come to him now, and he nodded slowly, not saying any more. It takes time. It takes time to assimilate such events, and honestly, I do not know if I've actually ever done so. The day had started powerfully with an extraordinary darshan of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. The effect of that darshan stayed with me throughout the day, fortunately. We do not understand the mercy we received from Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj, but we certainly know it was sweet, abundant, and causeless. And although I am ever grateful, I know that I can never be grateful enough. All glories to Om Vishnupad, Srila Gour Govinda Gosvāmī Maharaj. He not only understood and imparted the deepest import of Srila Prabhupada's teachings, but embodied them and expertly guided others into them. I have learned from Srila Gurudev and our acharyas that a bona fide guru has no guru abhiman, no conception of guru abhiman, a conception of oneself as a guru. Rather, he is exclusively fixed in the abhiman of being a disciple. This is more than extremely rare in this world. And this was Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj. Our greatest fortune is to associate with such persons, hear from them, and possibly serve them in any way in the hope of receiving their merciful glance, which makes bhakti blossom in the heart. Thank you. Aspiring to serve Shri Guru and the Vaishnavas, Vaijayantī-mālā dāsī, March 2nd, 2021. Nityalila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatara Shata Śrīmad Srila Gour Govinda Gosvāmī Mahārāja Ki Jai. All right, thank you for reading with me. I'll end here and we'll see each other tomorrow for Śrīmad Bhagavatam tomorrow morning. Dandavad pranams, everybody. Haribol. Actually, I'll do it Jai Dhwani again. Jai Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ju Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Gosvāmī Mahārāja Srila Gurudev Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Srila Bhaktivedanta Vaman Gosvāmī Mahārāja Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Mahārāja Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Gosvāmī Mahārāja Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosvāmī Prabhupada Ki Jai. Tadiya Shubhat Avirbhav Titi Ki Jai. Titi Palan Kari Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Swapashad Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishta Srila Gorksharas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishta Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Bhatta Das Raghunath Shar Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai. Namachay Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandal Gaur Mandal Vaja Mandal Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Bharata Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Radha Kun Shama Kun Yamuna Ganga Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Hari Nam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishripad Srila Gaur Govinda Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Tadiya Shubhati Rabhav Titi Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavascha Krishna Bhakti Padadevi Satyavatai Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyai Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavat pranams everybody.